Welcome back to Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I want to welcome to our table and our discussion Lisa Williams from the Kalamazoo Public Library. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
And I'm glad to have you here. You've been overseeing the Reading Together program, and I know that you came in about halfway through the programs being set up for this year. So if I ask you something that disadvantages you in those terms, let me know.
Agreed. That's fair.
I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the history of the program. I know we were talking earlier about this is the 6th year, and Don was going through the books. And if I think it would be good to tell something about the program, the history of the program, and some of the successes, and what's been happening so far this year. From my knowledge about it, you're closing in on the end of the reading program. So tell us about it.
Sounds good. Kalamazoo is not unique among the country in terms of having a community reading program. There are lots of places that have it. However, what does make us unique is that ours is more than just the celebration of a book. We look at Reading Together as an intentional strategy to build community. Our first program started in 2003, and it came as a result of some studies that had been done by Robert Putnam, who's famous for the bowling alone discussion about how we're all so separated anymore as society. The Kalamazoo Community Foundation was and still is a very, very strong leader in Reading Together, and they helped fund the program in the first few years until Kalamazoo Public Library decided it was so valuable that we were going to keep it and keep it part of our budget. But we use it as an intentional strategy to build community because Robert Putnam had suggested community reading programs as one way you can do that. Because if you pick a book that has many different themes, then you can attract people to the conversations and to the programs around those themes. And anytime you can get people from different parts of the community, different levels of education, different neighborhoods, different walks of life, in all sorts of ways, get people talking, then that's a way of building community.
One example of that is the program that I was able to attend, where the young people were there. Tell me the name of the woman who took the young people from the Baptist Church to Nicaragua.
Pat Hernandez.
Pat Hernandez,
yes.
Okay, right.
Tell
a little bit about the evening that we spent together and some of the responses from the youngsters.
It was, I thought it was really hopeful, just to begin. It's, it's great to see the next generation interested in serving and interested in visiting other parts of the world. Pat Hernandez from the American Baptist Church took a group of young people, college-age students, to Nicaragua. They went over Christmas break, and this was not easy for them. It wasn't at all a walk in the park. They had to ride, I believe it was a 6-hour ride in the back of a very bumpety truck on a very bumpety road with washouts here and there to get to this tiny village where there had not been any American visitors. And at this village, they were charged with helping lay the foundation for what's going to be a health clinic. They were working through a nonprofit service organization in Nicaragua that builds little bitty health clinics in remote parts of the country and educates the citizens about health and medical matters. And they were there. They lived on the floor in their sleeping bags. They ate together. There were ladies in the neighborhood who cooked for them, but they dug trenches so that they could pour concrete around the foundation of this clinic, and they worked really hard, but they loved every bit of it.
They were very, very enthusiastic. Don, I see you smiling.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. I've been to Nicaragua 11 times and lived down there for a while. Just the warmth of the Nicaraguan people. They're so welcoming and so kind. I'm sure that they would have gotten a lot out of it. And if they were eating the same thing that the people were eating, they came back thinner. I'm quite sure about that because
A lot of rice and beans.
at best, at best. If you get the beans, you're doing really well. Sometimes it's just rice too. What they do for clean water, do you know? Because outside of Managua, there's no clean water.
They brought it in with them.
They brought it in with them. Yeah.
And they said the water ran out on their last day.
Ah, wow. Gee whiz. Yeah, wow. I think this is such a great idea, and in the past, I think it has brought the community together around a lot of significant issues. What are some of the themes in here that you think that are really interesting?
What I love about a book or any work of art is that you can read it and you're going to get your own thing out of it. But some of the themes that have been identified with Barbara Kingsolver's book, Animal Dreams, and it is absolutely rich. Alzheimer's disease and elder care, for one thing, so we've explored that this year. Well, we mentioned the trip to Nicaragua. The whole notion of service is one. Other cultures, interacting with other cultures. The American Southwest, because the book takes place in Arizona. We've had some discussions of environmental concerns, because in the book there's an environmental catastrophe that's taking place in the little town of Grace, Arizona. Last night we had a fabulous presentation by Dr. Gottfried Oosterwal, who is a medical anthropologist. And he talked about what it's like for a Western-educated physician to practice in remote parts of the world.
Right.
And he talked about how we all have cultural codes, and we interpret other people's actions and words through the filter of our own cultural code, and explained how it's so easy to get to misinterpret other people.
Right. All those are terrific themes. And I remember you said that the book was dedicated to Ben Linder, who was an American volunteer who went down there, and that she wrote that because Americans are, they have amnesia. They forget about what went before. And I think that's very true of Nicaragua. And all the struggles and all the concentration that was on that during the 1980s and the 90s, and now it certainly has dropped out of the picture. And the situation of the Nicaraguan people has deteriorated enormously since the early 1990s. But it's not on the agenda, and people aren't paying attention. And those young people going down there and seeing how those people have to live, I think more and more of that has to happen, because I think it's really important that people begin to realize what the international economic system is doing to the rest of the world, and how those people have to live. I think that's really important.
Yeah. That theme of historical amnesia that she addresses in the book is just so important. I mean, here we have, in the Republican primaries, we had all these candidates falling all over themselves, not to identify, of course, with the current president, but to go back and associate themselves with Ronald Reagan.
Right.
And yet, again, how quickly we forget, how down the memory hole, that Ronald Reagan armed a terrorist group to attack innocent people inside Nicaragua.
Absolutely.
And sold weapons to Iran, another terrorist country, and used the proceeds to fund the terrorist group attacking innocent people inside Nicaragua. And so, but Reagan is held up as this great paragon somehow.
Right.
And yet here he was aiding this terrorist group in Nicaragua, and that all gets forgotten. It's all down the memory hole.
We had two faculty from Western come and lead a discussion about U.S. involvement in Central America, just for that reason, because so many people have forgotten it.
Oh, yes.
So we had someone from the Spanish department and someone from the geography department, and it was valuable to kind of remind us.
Yeah, and the illusion is that everything is settled over there now and the people are much better off, whereas the quality of life of the people in Nicaragua and El Salvador has deteriorated enormously. I mean, I was down there in the very beginning of the revolution, after the Sandinistas first took over. And that country is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. But people were eating. They were giving out rice and beans to make sure everybody ate. Before the revolution, less than 30% of the people had any access to health care. They set up a national health care system, which the World Health Organization gave an award for the third world country doing the most for their people. I saw the schools where they had 3 sessions of schools. The little kids went in the morning, the older kids in the afternoon, and the adults at night. And they had what UNESCO identifies as the most successful literacy campaign in the history of the world. That's UNESCO saying that. And here now, they're off the charts, and all that has been lost, and they've reverted, and there's no remembrance of what was before.
It's important to point out that the Sandinistas came to power through a democratic
That's
election.
right.
Sandinistas came to power through a democratic
That's
election.
right.
The Sandinistas weren't perfect, obviously, and they
No.
made a number of mistakes, but nonetheless, they did come to power in a democratic fashion. And so here we were, the United States, attempting to undo a democratic election in Nicaragua
Again.
and reimpose an oppressive government upon the people there. Because, again, just as we mentioned with regard to Cuba in the first half of the show, Nicaragua could not be allowed to assert any kind of independent nationalism and move outside the orbit of American imperialism.
That's right.
And
That's right.
they had to be punished for that, and they were.
Yeah.
I have to prove here what I keep telling my grandson. The more you know, the more it's possible to know.
Exactly.
yes.
I want to pull in. There's a character in the book, Doc Homer, who suffers from memory loss, maybe from Alzheimer's, and that becomes a critical thing in the book, because his refusal to tell things to the girls does really affect the two girls in a different way. Did you want to say something about that?
Yeah. Well, I liked what you said first about the more you know, the more
You can know.
You realize you don't know.
I think
That works too.
I think that's a perfect motto for going to a library. Because
Oh,
the
yeah.
library enables that.
You had to say that.
I
didn't
did.
Good for you. Good. I love libraries.
Doc Homer is the father of Cody and Hallie, the two sisters in the book. And by the time we know him in the book, he is suffering from memory loss for sure, and he is aware of it, and he tells Cody about it, and that's why she comes to the town. But what has happened over her life, Cody and Hallie's lives, is that Doc Homer has held himself back from the community, and he has withheld information from the daughters, information about their family history, and has caused them to feel like outsiders in the community. When you find out at the end of the book, of course, that they really have always belonged to the community, and the community has always felt that they were a part of it. It's a long way to get there, but you see what lack of information can do to a child, because Cody in particular, just never felt welcome in the community. There was one thing that she talks about, how whenever she and her sister were invited to someone's home, they always stayed till the end and would wash dishes because they were so grateful that someone invited them.
Wow.
But through Cody's return, through having to come to terms with her own past, she starts uncovering more truth and has a different view on things by the time the book is over with. And Doc Homer is afforded, certainly, there's a lot of forgiveness and reconciliation in the book, and he's certainly given a great deal of empathy and forgiveness and grace by the time the book is over, because he was hurting too.
We have 5 minutes left in our discussion, and I want to get in. You mentioned when we were preparing the question that Kingsolver used to write the book, and do you have it in front of you there?
I do, and
Okay.
I love this because, again, you get more out of a book than you realize. She wrote the book to answer a question, and her question was, why do some people engage with the world and its problems while others turn their backs on it? And why is it that these two sorts of people can occur even in the same family? And so what Barbara Kingsolver did so beautifully is she imagined two sisters. One who was engaged with the world, Hallie, who chose to go to Nicaragua, and Cody, who's the protagonist of the book, who is holding herself back. And so she imagined backwards to the point at which she could imagine where one of them decided to hold herself back. What were the circumstances that caused Cody than to withdraw. And if you've read the book, then you know she loses a baby. She has a miscarriage. And it seems at that point she was so isolated, even in her family, and you know that terrible incident for her just kind of paralyzed her. Because you also realize in the book, early on, she was the one who was urgently trying to save these little coyote puppies from drowning. So she had actually been engaged with the world. And I wonder if Barbara Kingsolver is in a way saying that it's natural for us to do that, but that sometimes circumstances cause us to withdraw. That's a little bit what I get from it. It was natural for her as a child, for her and her sister, to, you know, to have some sense of caring.
Well, you've got 4 teachers sitting here, all of whom are interested in community. And in this last minute and a half, you know, I've raised that question with myself. When I drive by and I see the demonstrations going on, whenever they're going on, and I see that they reduce in size and there are fewer and fewer people, and you've been organizing for years, what is it that draws the people in and keeps them there? Because the excitement and the perhaps the newness of it is attractive, and it wears off.
Right.
So we have 2 minutes. So
yeah.
Don, can you answer that?
Well, I think that it's very hard to sustain involvement. But what you have to do, I think, is that you always have to keep the issue alive, and you have to keep educating people. And then sometimes, well, always, there will be a critical event.
Tipping point?
A tipping point, such as 3 Mile Island, or something that's going to force everybody to look at this issue. And then all the people that have learned the stuff are now prepared, and then you can really take action.
Don, I'm sorry to cut you off at that point, but I'm getting the high sign. Thank you very much for being with us. Lisa, thank you for being with us. And as always, it's great that we can sit here and have this discussion for the community. We'll see you next time on Critical Issues, Alternative Views. Until then, goodbye.